My name is Patricia Kawuma and I'm a project associate with AHB. We are delighted to have an international audience with delegates dialing in from Africa and beyond. Thank you for logging in to this webinar, which tackles a global issue. Before I introduce you to today's moderator and we start the webinar, I would like to take you through some housekeeping rules. Attendees will be on mute during the session. Please note that you can post your questions in the Q&A section on your screen. Your typed questions will be responded to as much as possible. This is a 90-minute event. Please observe the allocated time during the session. This webinar will be held in English. If you would like to listen to the French translation, please click on the translation button on the screen and mute the original audio. I would also like to take this opportunity to show you a couple of short videos from our event partners who contributed to this event. One is from BD and the second is from Lynette. Some of you have been with us for a long time, some are new partners. We are happy to have you here. A very warm welcome to all of you.
We're behind you every single day. It's why long before COVID-19, we helped wage battles against polio, tuberculosis, and HIV. It's why we're in this fight right now, and why long after, we will keep doing our part in support of human health. It's what we do. It's our entire reason for being.
Here you see the agenda for today's event themed manufacturing and supply chain. I would like to reiterate that this is a 90-minute session. We are proud to have champions in the private health sector, as well as Dr. Moeti Matshidishu, who is the leader at World Health Organization Africa region based in Congo, Brazzaville. And now, I would like to hand over to our moderator for the day, Dr. Githinji Gitahi. He's a well-known global health leader based in Nairobi and the CEO of Amref. Welcome, Dr. Githinji.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, colleagues. And I'm happy to see you all here joining us for this conversation on manufacturing and supply chain. I would like to probably just very quickly explain what we'll be discussing here. One is that we all know that we've had a major disruption of supply chains by COVID-19. And the COVID-19 measures have actually triggered unprecedented measures by national governments, which have resulted in trade disruptions, both locally and globally. These have threatened our supply chain not only for COVID-19 management itself, but also for all the other essential commodities that we need for maintaining health for our populations. In low and middle income countries, where these supply chains are already fragile at best of times, we know that we already have a challenge. This disruption has made a bad situation even worse, leading to shortages and price hikes. We've seen price changes, we've seen shortages. We know that this could also trigger an epidemic of fake commodities because of the price changes and the shortages. So this is really what we want to discuss today. And today we have the great lineup of speakers that have been introduced to you by Patricia. And then after the speakers, we will then get back to a set of questions or a conversation. And to start us off with a keynote address is somebody who needs no introduction. Dr. I like to call her Shidi Moeti, good friend of mine, someone I respect, someone I told congratulations on her second term as WHO Regional Director. So we are happy to have Moeti. And Moeti will be making a keynote address on manufacturing and supply chain. And also, we all know that WHO has actually a shortage reporting system, which is able to track shortages in time and be able to identify where the supply chains are being disrupted. And I hope Dr. Moeti will comment on these things. And I know there are so many things that WHO globally and regionally are doing to streamline supply chain and to make sure that we reduce the impact of the pandemic. So this is for Moeti. Moeti, welcome. This is your time. You have 10 minutes to make your keynote address and look forward to hearing from you. Over to you, Moeti.
Okay, thank you very much, Githinji. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. First of all, a huge thanks to Amit and the Africa Health Business Symposium webinar series for having invited me to come and join you today to talk about the manufacturing and supply chain in Africa and how important it is at the moment. We provided some slides that I'm going to use, so if that could be uploaded, that would be amazing. So I think it's already been introduced by Githinji. In recent months, can we go back to the previous, please? Yeah, starting here. So in the recent months of the COVID-19 pandemic, the global supply chain for the key items required in response by countries has been disrupted in a huge way. And this has drawn attention to the need for strong and, more importantly, more equitable systems coupled with an increase in local manufacturing capacities in the African region. I think we've had several sessions, and I know that you all have participated in some of them, where this has been very much highlighted as an agenda that needs to be accelerated, an agenda where we need to do better, both from the side of the governments that set the policy, that create the environments, and of course from the private sector in terms of investment with the participation and support of organizations like WHO. Next slide, please. So first, we acknowledge that the manufacturing capacities on the continent are limited and need to be improved upon, need to be expanded. Generally, our countries have been reliant on international procurement, and many of them, particularly the low-income countries, with support from partners. So for instance, in most sub-Saharan African countries, between 70 and 90% of medicines are imported. And by way of comparison, there are around 1,000 pharmaceutical manufacturing sites in Africa, whereas in China, there are 5,000, and in India, there are 10,000. From the start of the pandemic, there's been growing awareness of the need for a more coordinated, reliable, and fairer global supply system. And early on, we saw countries and partners procuring supplies on their own. This led to duplication in requests, at least in the work that you are doing with some partners and countries, as well as to inflated demand. This is a unique situation where everybody in the world literally was competing for the same items, which in turn led to price increases and some of the other distortions, speculation, stocking up in order to sell it at higher prices. So for example, we've seen mask prices increasing from about 10 cents per item to $2.35, and the price of some active pharmaceutical ingredients involved in this has also increased. And with national supply, we have seen those countries with manufacturing capacities put pressure on the manufacturers to supply and limit the supply to the domestic markets. And some governments have imposed restrictions on exportation of some key items. I think we have examples of PPEs and also of test kits, which were desperately needed by the countries in the African region. The border closures and transport challenges have not helped the supply chains to keep going. The border closures were imposed for very good reasons, because countries needed to limit the movement of people and therefore movement of the virus, but they've had a very profound impact on the ability to move supplies and therefore on the supply chains. There's been a race for supplies. Those who came first sometimes bought first, and the advantage really went to those countries or those entities that had the volume and the money to pay upfront. And what we observed was that low-income countries were very often left out. So for example, if I take a quick example of the test kits, as we have measured it or monitored it through the testing per capita in our region compared to other regions, it is the low-income countries in Africa that had the very lowest testing rates. The middle-income countries, to some extent, initially did manage with their additional money to go up on the international market. But today it's difficult for everybody to have access to these test kits. So there has been a need then from the WHO to pool the procurement process, to establish at the global level a UN consortium for COVID-19 supplies, where we take advantage of the economies of scale and the volumes and some of the donor money coming into WHO and other UN agencies to book, if you like, to secure supplies together. This is something that we have been able to do and we are working on doing so that we can improve the access and somewhat balance the inequities that we've observed in the market. I'd also like to mention that this builds on work that we've been doing over a number of years, for example, supporting some of our small island countries, which on their own are not able to compete on the international market. Next slide, please. So we need a partnership. I know that the partnership exists, and I very much appreciate your association, this organization, the mobilization of the private sector to emphasize that there needs then to be a partnership between African industries, the private sector at the international level, and African governments and African people in order for this to work better for African countries. So public and private partners need to build on the current momentum, and there are persistent reservations and challenges that need to be addressed, including the lengthy bureaucracy. I speak now from having spoken to some of our private sector partners, and of course, some of the context in which some of this work is being done, the demands, the favors that are asked, the dynamic fraud situations. I think we need to acknowledge some of these challenges so that they are addressed openly between private sector partners and the governments that set the policy and the environment. There's a need for transparency, not only in local markets, but also in relation to international transactions and gifts. And this requires international collaboration and really partnership between governments and the private sector. There is also the high cost of production due to a deficit of structural investment. For example, a pharmaceutical factory in Senegal, we've understood, closed early this year for lack of profitability due to the power outages and electricity costs. So in short, we're talking about political commitment. In order to create that conducive environment, the governments also need to invest so that those who wish to invest, either the nationals, the indigenous investors, or international investors in production on the continent, can find a favorable environment in which to do so. A strong regulatory system provides the foundations not only for formal compliance with norms and standards, but also helps to build consumer trust and demand for quality products. And private sector manufacturers of essential medicines, for example, in a couple of countries, the DRC and Togo, don't often meet the requirements to compete in national tenders because the national regulatory system is not able to attest that the manufacturers comply with good manufacturing practices. So this is another way in which political commitment, establishing these mechanisms functioning well on the side of the government, is necessary to encourage investment and local production and help to create confidence in the products that are produced on the continent. We also think in WHO that the private sector's advocacy is needed to encourage governments to harmonize regulatory practices, rules, and requirements so that we can be more efficient. These setting of standards can be done together and we don't have to go from one country to the other, because many of them, and we work very closely with them in WHO, have resource gaps and also have capacity gaps. So working together, the regulatory authorities, national regulatory systems will help to create this conducive environment and also will help to make them stronger with mutual support. As WHO, we work with them on this in this way. The return on investments, of course, needs to be front and center. If private sector investors are going to put their money in and invest in local production, that also needs to be supported with greater exploration of innovative financing and business models that succeed in attracting investment, in mobilizing resources, and also in generating demand and in providing a return for investment. In one country, which I will not aim, a plant was built to manufacture IV solution locally. This is a very basic medical supply and easy to produce. This was done with a partner and a main supplier overseas, who, when they learned of this development, they dropped the price dramatically themselves so that even the government where this country, this production was happening, was buying, and so were the private buyers, and the surrounding countries continued to buy from the international partner. So this points to the need for policies that support and protect local manufacturers from price wars and promoting local production. So how can governments play a role in doing this? We could also, I think, investigate tax incentives that can create an enabling environment for investment, and a lot of work is needed in this area. For example, in several countries, we know that taxes are higher to import active pharmaceutical ingredients to manufacture medicines locally than they are for importing the medicines that have already been produced. So this will not encourage local investment in the production capacity. This is because the ingredients are classed as chemical products rather than medicines, which usually benefit from tax exemptions. So if in creating the environment for bringing in the more basic elements and producing the end product, I think as governments, we need to work with governments to look differently at some of these factors. Other factors include making sure that the skilled workers are available to work in the production facilities so that the skills, the well-remunerated, eventually people are there for the local investors in production to be able to source. And then finally, I'd just like to cite the importance of partnerships and coordinating and collaborating across borders, and the fact that policies are needed that encourage the transfer of technology and know-how from multinational companies to local manufacturers. So for example, in Ghana, with the support of the UK, a pharmaceutical partnership for COVID-19 is providing Ghana with the infrastructure, the expertise, industry data, and new and in-kind funding for COVID-19 promising vaccine production, delivery, and advocacy efforts. So it all takes a partnership between local manufacturing partners, potential local manufacturers, the governments, multinational companies, and the international community to pull it all together so that the conducive environment, the right policies, the regulatory capacities, and the partnership and support in transitioning in local manufacturing take place. The final slide, please. So in closing, I'd just like to cite a few issues that are necessary. First, the governance is important. The regulatory environment, as I've already said, setting clear and fair rules, making sure that we are helping with innovative financing and business models, creating an enabling environment, as I said, partnerships for working together, including with international manufacturers to support local manufacturing. Next. So we are very grateful for from what we've seen as a determination of the private sector to support the COVID-19 pandemic response. Really, it's been a huge leap, I think, from what was happening in the past, and we need to build on it. It needs to be a strong foundation for moving forward in the future. So those partnerships are extremely important to continue and to expand. And we have, at the continental level, regional and collaborative approaches that can yield faster results. So for example, we need to leverage the regional economic communities. We need to work on the determination of the African Union and the RECs to work together, including around enabling trade and business collaboration within the continent, between different countries. Governments on the other side have to ensure that the legal and policy frameworks function well to support public-private partnerships, and they need to invest in their regulatory systems for quality assurance and to support the financing and provide a conducive environment for the type of financing that's needed for manufacturers to invest and to produce for countries, so that we will never again be facing the very painful situation that has confronted African countries in their attempt to respond to this pandemic. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Regional Director Moeti, Head of WHO Afro. Thank you for those points. And you've noted several areas before we go to the next speaker. And I know we are going to have, Patricia, we are going to have a partner video shortly. But you brought in the importance of political commitment. We are going to be talking in the panel on how to harness the common free trade in Africa, and also African Medical Agency regulatory systems that Moeti has talked about, increasing expertise and partnerships. And I would like to add my more recent favorite, which is trust capital. That all these things you're highlighting and the challenges we see is because of absence of trust capital. And I hope that we can discuss how to build trust capital across the multinationals, the bilaterals, private sector, civil society. That really would be the glue that makes all these great ideas move forward. So thank you very much, Moeti. I would like to hand over to Patricia for the partner video. And after that, we'll go to Kareem. We'll start the panel. So over to you, Patricia.
Ladies and gentlemen, please watch a partner spotlight from one of our partners, Mark.
This is life. A moment of joy. A dream come true. All pure love. A tiny breakthrough. Or maybe a triumph. A constant struggle. A clash of ideas.
Now I have to call in.
The unexpected. To feel great, strong, or simply human. Constantly questioning. Are we curious enough? Could we be closer? Can we?
Thank you very much. And I think that video brings us straight into Dr. Kareem, a good friend of mine, head of Africa Bureau for Mark. But Kareem has another hat, because Kareem now is also heading the Africa Bureau of IFPMA. And we're really proud of you, Kareem, and what you're doing. As we go into the panel section, we have three speakers. We have Kareem, who is going to speak to us. We have Samba, and we have Joffrey Yaga. I'll be introducing each of them as we go, but I want to quickly reflect as we go to the panel so that the panelists can focus on some of these areas. The disruption, especially for people in pharmaceuticals like Kareem, the disruption is all the way from active pharmaceutical ingredients, manufacturing and supply. We know that Africa, will source some of these, some of their drugs from China, India. There's major disruptions there. Transportation, manufacturing of finished goods is disrupted. export-import trade is disrupted, arriving at warehouses, and also last mile points of dispensing, because in country there are also disruptions. And all these have resulted in what I say, there are changes in price, prices are going up. We are now looking at how do we handle this opportunity, where is the silver lining in the COVID-19 pandemic, in actually bouncing forward in Africa supply chain? Is it manufacturing? Is it local manufacturing? Is it regulatory frameworks? Is it partnerships? You know, as Moeti talked about, is it trust capital? So Kareem, there's your chance, 10 minutes. What do you think we need to do to build back, to build better, to build forward, or to bounce forward, as they say, in manufacturing and supply chain in Africa? Over to you, Kareem.
Thank you very much, Githinji. Hello, good afternoon to all the people around this table, I mean, virtual table. So, yes, thank you. These are very, very good questions. And you think I spent like 3 months, you know, asking around me how we can resolve two issues, because we've indeed seen this disruption, you know, happening. And my first question was, what's going to happen the day we will discover a vaccine against COVID? Let's just to try to be extremely specific, pragmatic and practical. I mean, any one of the big pharma or any pharma company or which will discover a vaccine will be able to produce 100,000 of liters of vaccine. Now, the bottleneck will be in the fill and finish and controlling those vaccines. I mean, simply filling the syringes and controlling the syringes, which is not an easy exercise, because it's also already in terms of QA, quality assurance and quality control, extremely complex, but still it's something that we can transfer in 18 months. And we know that something good gonna happen, and we'll have some good news around December. So today, really, I'm going for a call, an emergency call, to make sure that in Africa, we'll be able to build and to have at least 4 or 5 fill and finish centers, which can immediately supply in a very equally manner, because that's also a concern from humanitarian point of view. It doesn't make any sense to see a Japanese guy vaccinated, getting his immunization, and the other one no. And we in Africa waiting for another 12 months until we get the vaccine. I mean, this is not acceptable at all. So we need, I found a kind of answer within Merck, because we have this capacity to immediately transfer this technology quickly and fastly. We need to find the right partnership, the governmental support, the public-private partnership model, any one of all these, you know, models that we have set the last years at the level of the World Economic Forum, at the level of the African Union, at the level of the WHO, AFRO. So we have several tools that we can use. But again, fill and finish is key to make sure that we will have an equally access to the vaccine in a due time. I mean, the procurement, the price will not be the main issue. The availability will be the issue. And I'm sure that we will be all responsible in this case. I don't see any one of these big companies, of these colleagues that I have in the other company, you know, not making sure that Africa will have access. But if you have a bottleneck, a physical bottleneck, it's a physical bottleneck. And you cannot do more than you can do. So it is our responsibility today to identify the investor, the model, the financing, the funding, whatever it is, but we need to invest money in putting in place fill and finish units in Africa. I'm not defending this because of we have this capacity in Merck, but we are open to support. But I'm sure that there is also some other companies who are willing to support in putting in place fill and finish. This is my first call. The second one was really something I'm not familiar with, because it was a supply chain issue. And then I asked, guys, can you imagine that because we have grounded all the aircraft, passenger aircraft, Africa cannot be supplied in insulina, cannot be supplied in any life-saving drugs because of the cold chain, because of the air cargo freight was not available, and we used to use the passenger aircraft for the transportation of those goods. I mean, and suddenly they all have been grounded, I mean, from one day to the other. So it's also the right time now. We have more than 750 airports in Africa. To select 3 and 4 of them to serve regional, a regional cluster of countries, and to have a GDP, good distribution practices hub on the airport, and having our resources in terms of transportation. And believe me, you know, I went through the business case, and it's not. First of all, it might be extremely profitable for those who can invest in that. But on the other side, it's not that difficult to put it in place. And we cannot accept, in the frame and in the light of what I have seen during this pandemic and the previous one as well, but especially this one, because this one was a bit more complex to manage than the previous pandemic. I mean, we cannot accept to not having any buffer, security, safety stock available in hubs, in 3-4 hubs maximum in Africa, which can be immediately released and transported upon request. And we can ask the manufacturer from all over the world to make sure that they have their safety stock warehouse there. I mean, it's something that we can do in 6 months for these hubs, and in 18 months for the fill and finish for biologics. That's I mean, that's something that we cannot afford to not do. I mean, we have to be extremely responsible. We have to involve ourselves. Solutions that are there in a company like mine. I mean, we have several amazing solutions because we are a science and technology company. But at the end of the day, we have to stop here discussing, and we have to move now and to make sure that these 2 topics are resolved, because solutions are there, and it's not something that, wow, it's not affordable, we cannot do it. I think that Dr. Moti clearly expressed the fact that regulatory environment needs to be improved, but I mean, the day of a pandemic, once the vaccine is there and produced in a country, believe me, you cannot say it's not because of the regulatory issues that you will not accept a vaccine coming filled and finished in Kenya. To Uganda, you will not accept it, or into Cameroon, you will not accept it. No, you will accept it because you have to save and to protect your population, and it's a matter of global health. So that's what I wanted to share very shortly with the group, and I'm open for the question if there is some.
Thank you very much, Kareem, and you've raised very important points. And I see you are not waiting; you're calling for action. You're calling for action in specifically fill and finish, and you're saying we can do this in 18 months. You're even giving us a timeline that we need to work with. You are then talking about this regional, procurement, warehousing, manufacturing, whatever that is structured as, and just increasing that capacity. You're saying we can do this in 6 months. In fact, when we look at the vaccine, there was something I was looking at earlier, and I shared with some people that we are celebrating the vaccine, and it's only in phase 1. We have to go to phase 2, phase 3, manufacturing, packaging, distribution, and then last mile. And the questions you're raising are about how do we stop thinking about the vaccine and let the scientists think about it, and then we start creating the infrastructure for delivery of the vaccine, so that the vaccine is ready. It's easy to deliver that. I know we are going to come to Samba, and we'll talk about financial strategies, restructuring, and all that, but I'll hand over back to Patricia for one more partner video, and then we come to Samba Bathili. Patricia.
Thank you, Dr. Githinji. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch a partner spotlight from one of our partners, Equally Health.
I'm Samba Bachili, CEO and founder of ADS Group, Africa Development Solution, also co-founder of Equally. Equally, that means equal access to quality healthcare. The main services provided by Equally is a health checkup from the bottom line, the last mile. Because if you want to achieve universal health coverage, you need to do that approach. There's no other solution. I'm sorry to say, we are doing sick care because the problem, we only try to solve when people are sick. Healthcare should be done before, so we need to prevent.
There you are. Thank you, Samba. Thank you for that and for touching my heart by talking about universal health coverage, because I'm a great ambassador of equitable health systems that are resilient, whose mechanism for delivery is UHC. Samba, of course, you are a world-renowned philanthropist. You are the founder of ADS. But most importantly, when I look at your background, you've done a lot of financial strategies, financial restructuring, especially for industries like data, energy. Now, listening to Kareem and talking about the dreams of creating these hubs in Africa, fill and finish, this will require financial restructuring. But you know, obviously, that we have border challenges. You know, as you said, there are regulatory challenges. So we are hoping that we'll also discuss the need for accelerating the African Medical Agency so that we have a common regulatory framework. But for you, I would like to maybe, I know you have some reflections to make, but comment also on this issue of how do we get the capital to do these things in a way that will make the result equitable? Over to you, Samba.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Samba.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Your question is about how to make this capital available. You know, one thing I said most of the time, if there is political will, there is always financial. We just need to make sure that projects are bankable. In the area of healthcare, there's a lot of money that is spent and not most of the time the right way. If you take the expenditure of most of our government into the healthcare sector, there's a lot of misuse of the money, because most of the time we do bid, people supply equipment, and then every 2-3 years we start again. I think we need to change that approach. In the other sector, public-private partnership are very efficient, and the same thing could be applied to the private sector. I think money is not the issue if we structure the thing properly. I give you an example. We at ADS, we did a partnership in Burkina Faso, where we bring equipment as service. And we just look at the market, and if you take the case of biochemical tests, we look at the number of tests done in the country, and we come with a solution, equipment and test, with a cheaper price, because we work on the volume. And also we provide a SLA to the government, where there was most of the time breakdown of equipment. There's now a maintenance SLA for 4 hours. Anytime there's a breakdown, 4 hours after, we have to maintain or change the equipment. These are models that can be replicated in every country. It's just a question of approach, political will, and there is enough money in the world if we put together a sustainable business model. And I think everybody have to play a role, government, private sector, institution, private donors. So there is a big challenge, but there is also a big opportunity, and there is solution. Whenever there is challenge, there is opportunity. The one thing the COVID showed to African that we must rely on ourselves, because most of the time, most of African go abroad for healthcare. Now the good thing that the COVID showed us is that now we have to rely on ourselves. We need to think regionally. You know, each country cannot build a hospital facility. We need to look at each country competitive advantage. Some country will take care of cancer, some country will take care of heart disease. So this is a regional approach, a regional consultation. So we need to work together, private and public sector, to bring solution. Funding, there is enough funding in the world. We did it in other sector, telecom, energy, where when there is a soundproof project, money is not the issue. It's always available.
Thank you, Samba. And thank you for those remarks. You're basically saying it's political will. It's not about the capital. It's about political will. It's about accountability.
Political will and good, sustainable and innovative approach. We need to change what is happening now. Be it equipment, waste, on and on. Starting every different supplier, different approach. We need to change.
So Samba, could I ask you a question then? In this structuring, in this financial structuring, where do you see the role of tax resources, of public money? Is it blended financing? If we are to think across the region, we are thinking continental, and we are saying political will. So we talk to Moeti here, we talk to the heads of state, the AU, and we have political will. How do you see public money and private money working together to create the infrastructure that Kareem was asking for?
Blending finance is part of the solution. Give you an example. If you take the hemato or any blood test, because most of those healthcare system, it starts with first diagnosis, testing. You know, if I take the example of Burkina Faso, before yearly, there is a 1.200,000 tests that are imported in the country. Okay, the cost was higher before because different supplier. Knowing that there's 1.2 million tests, we come with a solution where we bring equipment and tests to a cheaper price because of the volume, and also the efficiency of the private sector with the maintenance and all these things. Because a doctor is not a technical guy for equipment. He should focus on his job. Somebody have to take care of that burden. So talking about the blending part, some area of the healthcare is not commercially viable. This is where the government or donors should come in. But there are some parts who are commercially viable. Private sector can play a role there by bringing the funding, by bringing the equipment, by bringing the maintenance. This is where public and private sector need to sit down and think about innovative way of changing the thing. It's happened in many other sectors. It can happen in the healthcare sector.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And now I would like to come to Joffrey Yaga. Joffrey, you are running a startup. You're running, you are, an awarded aeronautical engineer. You're now running a startup on drones and delivery, last mile delivery, and thinking about this conversation and thinking around the last mile, because at the end of the day, you can do the pharmaceutical ingredients and you can have the medicines in the warehouse, but until they reach the last person. I'll give you an example. I'm currently in Murang'a County in Kenya, and I've been here for 3 days looking around preparedness for COVID-19. And when I look around, I ask myself, our health systems right now are built for childhood vaccination. But now we are going to get a vaccine. I know there, and maybe I'll come back to Moeti later to ask about, when you talk about distribution and supply chain for this vaccine, are we thinking about distribution and supply chain alongside childhood vaccine capacity, which we currently have? Are we going to build a new supply chain for elderly, or are we going to offer it to everyone? So maybe that's a question we'll come to later, but I'm just posing to you, Joffrey, how do you see the technologies that you're applying playing a role in shortening the journey to the last mile for COVID vaccine, but also for all the other essential commodities that we need to maintain people's lives in Africa? Over to you, Joffrey. But before that, Patricia will run a partner video, then we come to you. At least you have the concept, then you move on after the partner video. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch a partner spotlight from Astral Aviation, our partners. Thank you.
Good. Over to you, Joffrey.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Githinji, for the introduction. But allow me first to say a big thank you to African Health Business Symposium, for making this one-of-a-kind webinar series, and especially putting a focus on manufacturing and supply chain, and how this is going to drive partnerships for COVID-19 across Africa. I concur with you that we are now living in very interesting times where we have to rethink the way we've traditionally done things in the past. And as you articulated before, the last mile delivery is one of the key aspects that we need to really think about, especially when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm also very honored to share this platform with the distinguished panelists that we have. I believe that the discussion, the insights, and all the ideas that will come out of this webinar will really go a long way in fostering and driving COVID-19 solutions across Africa. Again, as introduced, my name is Joffrey Yaga. I'm from a startup called Astral Aerial, and we are based here in Nairobi, Kenya. We are also a subsidiary of Astral Aviation, which is a cargo airline that has been operating in East Africa for the last 20 years. About 3.5 years ago, we decided to diversify into the future of technology, and that is unmanned aircrafts, commonly referred to as drones, with a particular interest of doing cargo deliveries, targeting remote locations in Africa. Next slide, please. So, as Dr. Githinji clearly elaborated, that one of the main problems that needs to get solved in the last mile delivery, especially in rural areas in Africa, that are usually affected by land isolation, and these are things like floods, things like conflict, or issues even of natural calamities. But also we've seen a lot of areas across Africa that do not have access to basic connectivity and transport infrastructure. And now when you take all of these issues and you couple them with the fact that we don't have a lot of good storage and warehousing facilities, this is when now we start seeing an inefficient distribution and supply chain system. As a quick example, the map on the right shows the current road network for medical supplies in Kenya. We believe as a company that with drones, we can be able actually to expand the coverage, and we can be able to reach every other Kenyan citizen, regardless of their geographical location. Next slide. But also, as we're talking about COVID, I think it's very important for us to take a step back and actually look at historical lessons and what we've learned from previous outbreaks across Africa. And the DRC Congo case studies, it was a good one for us, especially looking at last mile. where until a few weeks ago, when successfully now Ebola got eliminated, almost close to 2,300 people had died. But here, the important thing to note is that we realized that sometime it took 10 days. Imagine taking 10 days to deliver medical supplies from airports to the final destination. And this is due to weather and lack of infrastructure. So now that COVID is here, I think it's important for us. We are foreseeing difficulties going forward in terms of last mile delivery and supply chain. And we also foresee that this might be in magnitudes greater than even this Ebola use case because of the sheer magnitude of COVID, how many people it has impacted, and the coverage that the virus has. So I think it's therefore important for all of us from across multi-sector to come together and develop last mile solutions that reduce the delivery times, and all of us also to come up with ways that are way efficient than the previous means, and so that we can also bypass the bad infrastructure, the bad terrain. And I'm also forecasting a situation where we can be able to bypass the airports and other existing infrastructure and go directly to where the clients or the patients are. Next slide. So as a company, we've been known previously to have a large focus on the larger payload drones. So the drone you are seeing on the left there is called the Flux cargo drone. At the moment is the world's largest autonomous aircraft with a payload capacity of about 2 tons, and it has a range of 1,200 kilometers. The drone on the right is the Yamaha drone with a payload of 32 kilos, and it can be able to travel for 90 kilometers. Next slide. However, we've foreseen that there's a need for the high demand vaccine and medical delivery space that is coming up due to COVID-19. And we believe that we also need to come up with systems that solve the requirements of our clients and people on ground with a maximum impact. So this video, perhaps if you can play it, demonstrate one of the solutions that we'll be bringing for COVID. So as you can see, it's a very unique system. It takes off like a helicopter, but then it transitions to a fixed wing mode. You'll see the front motors tilting, and it moves forward to a very efficient forward flight. And with this drone, we are able to cover up to 100 kilometers. That means in a space of 20 to 40 minutes, we can be able to deliver vaccination. So the way the system works is a healthcare worker in a remote clinic or remote hospital orders either vaccines or other kits. We receive the order and we fulfill it by operations team, where we load it to the aircraft. We do all the necessary checks, the government compliance and everything that is needed. And then we disperse the drone to where it's needed. And in a matter of 20 to 40 minutes, again, we are able to deliver the on-demand supply to where it was needed the most. And with this, we are looking at reducing the time to access life-saving medical supplies from days like what we saw in DRC, where it was taking 10 days, and we can now be able to fulfill some of these challenging deliveries by just a couple of hours. Next slide, please. So one of the modeling we are doing around Kenya is that we are going to have a hub across various towns in Kenya that are in close proximity to either existing warehousing or manufacturing facilities, whether it's KEMSA, whether it's the blood delivery, or whether it's the vaccination. And now from there, we'll be able now to distribute in more of like a hub and spoke model to remote clinics in these regions. Next slide. And finally, now that COVID is here, and especially for me, this is something which is very personal to me. As a young African, and living in these very difficult and trying times, and also having a startup again around these COVID-19 times, we have been printed in our beliefs, especially as a company, as a young people, that in Africa, we believe that innovation is not a choice, but is an absolute necessity. Next slide. And we believe that it's only through manufacturing, innovation, partnership, as Dr. Githinji was saying, that we can leap forward, or as Dr. Githinji said, is for us not to bounce back, but to bounce forward. And we believe it's only through these channels that we can be able to solve the current problems that we have, but also to move forward and to create a better future for generations to come. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hand you over back to you, Dr. Githinji.
Thank you very, very much, Joffrey Yaga. You know, I couldn't help but just admire the kind of technology you have on those videos. I think if I could ask you in 30 seconds, how much of this technology is currently available in Africa? The high-end drones that you've shown.
Yeah, so I can give you an example. The drone that you are seeing here, it has been successfully been flown many times in Mwanza in Tanzania, and in Malawi as well, and also in Ethiopia. So now that we are looking to bring it in Kenya, it will just now be an extension of something that has already been tried and tested across various parts of Africa. But also, most importantly, one of the things that we are doing that I forgot to mention is that we are also having a training program where we are going to look at local expertise and to train local people to understand and be able to use this technology so that that transfer of knowledge can be within not only at the national level, but also at the grassroots level where we also offer employment and other, high-skilled labor to local entrepreneurs and young people as well.
Good, thank you. Last question, do you have cross national border drone movement? Is that a requirement for improving our last mile? And also, if you're talking about, having a common regulatory framework, is there currently ability of drones to fly across borders, or they have to be limited nationally?
Wow. Thank you so much for that question. So yes, drones have the ability to move cross-border. One of the drones that I showed there had a range of 1,200 kilometers. But at the moment, because our regulatory frameworks in Africa are still in the infancy stage, and some of the countries are moving at a faster pace than the others. So we are seeing a situation where some countries are lagging behind. So what we are doing currently, there's a body called CASOA, which is the body that organizes all regulatory bodies across East Africa. And now we've been lobbying for about 1 year now so that we can harmonize our regulations across East Africa. And that will go a long way, not only in just in doing deliveries cross-border, but also chances for employment opportunities or even entrepreneurship that can move beyond similar countries. So we are lobbying for that, and I'm hopeful maybe in 2 years we'll be in that position to do cross-border flights.
Thank you very, very much for that. So I would like now to move into a set of questions. I think we only have about 15 minutes for this before I hand over back to the Africa Health Business team. But the first thing I would like to do as a moderator, I am a very gender sensitive person. I'm a feminist. So I would like to deliver apologies on behalf of AHB to the 171 people attending for having a male-dominated panel. Thank you, Moeti, for breaking that. At least we have Moeti on this panel, but I normally don't like chairing or moderating panels that are male-dominated, as we've had with Kareem, Samba, and Joffrey. But great people, no regrets chairing the panel. But I just wanted to place that out there. Now we have a set of questions that I would like to ask, and I would like to start with Moeti. I'm picking questions from people as we go, but there are other sets of questions, so we'll just mix them and we make this kind of quick fire. The first question to Moeti is, do you see the role of civil society in this? As you look at closing last mile, looking at improving our supply chain, what is the role of civil society? And secondly, could you comment on the WHO initiatives for ensuring that we have equitable access to vaccines in Africa? And I saw something on PACT, CDC, the mechanism of partnership for accelerating testing. I think that would be different. We can tackle that later. Could you just talk about WHO initiatives on vaccine availability, access, equity, and also the role of civil society? Over to you, Moeti. Then I'll come to the next question for the panelists.
Okay, thanks very much, Lola. Been a long time. Sorry, I'm struggling with the Zoom tool and I can't find my screen, but never mind, you don't have to see me.
We have your photo on the screen, so that's fine.
Yeah, it is okay because I've had to be navigating, doing other stuff. No, I think first of all, the WHO initiative, there's a multi-partner, multi-stakeholder initiative called the Accelerator Initiative to drive equitable access to various tools and technologies around the COVID-19 pandemic response. So first of all, the vaccine, of course, which is at the top of everybody's mind, concern and hopes, and then some diagnostics, therapeutics as well, with a range of partners, so some multilateral organizations. Okay, start my video.
Finally, thank you.
I hope I'm visible. Can't see myself, but that doesn't matter really. So with groups like Gavi, the Global Fund, with some governments, with CEPI, which is a partnership that was set up for investigating therapeutics and other technologies in the context of pandemics or epidemics, and with some private sector entities, with some scientists, with some philanthropists like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and with some civil society organizations. So there's been a coming together to work on the development, discovery, production, and distribution of these key tools in an equitable way. So one of the offshoots, additional initiatives out of that is a mechanism called COVAX, which is coordinated, led by Gavi, to work on preparing for a vaccine, then to make sure that the low-income countries that are Gavi beneficiaries, and also the middle-income countries that are not Gavi beneficiaries, but that we know have challenges in terms of paying on the open market, especially since some of them, at least in Africa, are small, can work together to procure together. To work around not procuring together those countries that are funded by Gavi partially, and other countries to pool their funding to, in a sense, I don't have the elegant way, to secure some of the supply that is going to be produced of some of the vaccines, some of the candidate vaccines that are being developed. So it's a way of trying to bring into the process some of the countries that would, I think somebody said it, I think it was Kareem, African countries that would be at the back of the queue for any new technology. This has been our experience in the past. Yeah. And I think, Lola, that civil society, that there are some civil society organizations already involved, and civil society from the African region, we very welcome to join this partnership, to be informed about the partnership, and then to see what you can do in terms of both advocacy, working through networks to inform various stakeholders, including the population themselves, in order to build up the momentum for African countries and people to get more actively engaged in the process, in this partnership, to be a part of the action on this. Yeah. I think I've answered both questions.
Yes, you have, very clearly. Sorry, very well. Thank you, Moeti. And before I move to the quick Q&A for the panelists, I would like to ask Patricia to run the last partner video, and then I'll come into the three panelists with some quick fire questions. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Dr. Githinji. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch a partner spotlight from one of our partners, Kenya Vision 2030.
Thank you, Patricia, for that. Now, to Kareem, I have a few questions, and I think, Moeti has commented on the kind of the global initiatives that are going on supply chain. I was reading something that was actually indicating that as the global initiatives construct the way to deliver commodities during COVID-19, there's a mass of other essential commodities which are not actually procured by global initiatives and are essential for sustenance of essential services. And they're more sensitive even to disruption. So maybe you can comment about that. Moeti has taken the global initiative and, what is going on with the other commodities? There's a question to you on how to cut short the lead time for PPPs. Public-private partnerships are very, very long lead time. I've experienced those myself. How do you bring down that? And also in your suggestion to create the hubs on procurement, warehousing, and logistics, which regulatory authorities should be involved in ensuring that that's successful? I know, of course, we have the Africa Free Trade Agreement that's going on now, not complete. Which regulatory authorities should be involved in meeting your requirements for the call you made to us that you say we can do in 6 months? Over to you, Kareem.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Githinji, for this question. By the way, at the end of the day, this is about warehouses in a free trade area, from where you can serve a cluster of countries. Therefore, we have international standards, such called good distribution practices standards. So if you take the most stringent regulation and you apply it to those warehouses, I mean, you will be automatically accepted by all the country. Anyway, today we have an issue. We cannot ensure a full and proper cold chain transportation, as an example. Very often, you have this thermologger who are tracking the temperature, warning and sending messages and saying that, wow, the cold chain was breached somewhere. So we cannot afford this anymore. Second, we need to have, air cargo freight capacity in Africa, based in Africa, and serving Africa. There is enough business there to establish a sustainable business model, profitable one, which can be financed. And this should be either a public-private partnership. If it is too long, let's go for a private investment. Let's go for a private investment. I mean, we need those warehouses and we need air cargo transportation urgently. I think we'll see most probably a second wave of this COVID-19. I don't know to which extent this will impact Africa directly, but indirectly, if we ground again and we stop and we close the border and we go for isolation for a couple of weeks, we'll face exactly the same issue. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable any longer. I mean, I don't want to go into detail now, but, it's not for big companies, for big air cargo companies, usually they have a capacity of load of 100 tons, So they come to Africa, they have to drop the goods in one single point. And from this single point, you have to organize the breakdown and to start to go for a smaller aircraft of 30 tons, 40 tons. But it shouldn't be passenger aircraft, because we will see a lot of, events maybe, like the one which happened a couple of weeks ago, which is ongoing, by the way, the panic which is ongoing. That's really extremely important, easy to put in place, very easy to put in place. And it doesn't require, as long as you are applying these high standards, good distribution practices, which are very well described at the level of any international organization or the FDA or the EMEA or whatsoever. I think you are serving properly the interest of the health interest of a population of a country.
Thank you, Kareem. And you've answered, many others that were asked. We had questions before. We had a question from Mogamat again around manufacturing, which you've kind of covered in your conversations. We don't have to go back to that. There was a question also from Dr. Kanyanta on what's hindering produce and Africa producing its own medicines. Again, you've covered most of this. So let me go to Samba and ask a question. There is a concern around, again, I talked about trust capital. and therefore the power dynamics between government, private sector, and citizens. And how do you make investments and make sure that they are protected against the power dynamics and the lack of trust that we know exists between government, public sector, and citizens themselves? Have you seen any examples where, for example, development bonds were done in the social sector and actually they were successful without a lot of mistrust in between? So over to you, Samba. Samba, are you still with us?
Hello, doctor?
Yes, Samba, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you repeat?
The question I was asking is around trust.
Okay.
We are talking around bringing together blended finance. For example, bringing government, bringing private sector, and there are dynamics between private sector, government, and citizens that create some element of mistrust between them. And have you seen areas where you developed structuring, financial structuring of instruments, including development bonds, and there were checks and balances to ensure that citizen interests were actually taken care of? Is there any example you can give, or is this an area you've handled? And if not, it's fine. Then we can probably get some answers from someone else.
Talking about citizen is all about impact, efficiency, and cost effectiveness. The model we are building, our model where it's cheaper for the citizen, efficient for the government, and for the patient. So at the end of the day, it's win-win situation for everybody. But what is the challenge is how to bring this new approach to a system that sometimes hermetic, like the healthcare system. You know, doctors, they have a lot of resistance sometimes when you're bringing a new approach. I give you an example. When you talk about a diagnosis laboratory, bringing equipment, bringing the cost down, everything, sometimes those people are used to be in control, because the way we're bringing it, the money circulation now change. We bring the bank in to collect the cash. So there is no access to cash for those people. Sometimes it might be challenging when people are used to different things. So that's how the challenging. But in terms of impact for the population, it's there. And this, I'm taking that from another industry. You know, I bring a new model into the ID system. When we come to government a few years back, with the leader of the ID system in the world, a company called IDEMIA, where we came, we proposed to the government, then they are not investing anymore. We're bringing everything. We bring the cost down. We bring efficiency, where people was waiting for a month to get their passport. Now they can get their passport in 6 months. So for the population, the impact is there. They're happy. But with the police, the first 8 months were very difficult, because cash was paid to their cashier. So you are taking some of their power. That's the challenge on those new systems. But what we bring efficiency, transparency. For information, government used to pay, Mali government, 1.7 billion for this service. It's like 3 million euro. Now the government is making 4 million euro profit out of the same service. So you see efficiency for the government. You see efficiency for the people, because citizens now can get their passport in 6 hours. Last time I get it 45 minutes for one friend of mine, the owner of Sheraton Hotel. I came to the hotel. He said, okay, Samba, I'm traveling to Abidjan. I have an urgency. I need to have the passport in the next 2 hours. So I called one of my agents to come. They came to his hotel, take his biometric, send it to the center, and few minutes after, they bring his passport. So just to tell you, efficiency is there. And especially now with the new technology, with all this change, it's easy. So traceability, efficiency, cost effectiveness. But it's the changing of mentality that's the real barrier, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much, Samba. And just like the manager of Sheraton, in Africa we say, I know somebody. So I want your number so that I can tell people I know somebody, and I'll call you next time for assistance. But thank you very much for sharing that as well.
And this is this is very transparent.
Absolutely. That was on a light note.
I called the team. They came. They took his info. He paid to the cashier in the hotel there the amount to EcoBank, and with the receipt, done.
That's great, because we've seen those kinds of innovations in our country, in Kenya. And I'll tell you, the level of mistrust between citizens and government is so much that even when systems are working, the public want to know who is making this $50 on every transaction, which government official is involved. So even creating trust between people and government, so that people see this efficiency that you've so clearly highlighted. And when they see the efficiency, they enjoy it without mistrust and wondering who else might be stealing our money. So the level of trust will also deliver higher efficiency for the people. Now, finally, Joffrey, Samba has talked about the resistance. I know he said doctors, but I would like to expand that to the industry, the healthcare industry. As an innovator, in 1 minute, have you seen resistance in introducing technology and innovation in these social sectors? Because that's where you're working.
Thank you so much, Dr. Githinji. Yes, I would say yes and no. And this is, I think it's just natural where every new technology has to prove itself, and you have to undergo a series of tests just to prove that your solution works. We also understand as a company that, especially in the humanitarian and in the health sector, trust is very important. And I think, as Dr. Kareem was saying, also looking at issues like cold chain, we need to establish that trust, that our clients can trust us not to break the cold chain, but to can be able to efficiently deliver that. So we've taken the other approach where we've taken upon ourselves to actually prove that this works. And we are now increasingly seeing more interest from various industry sectors to try out this technology.
Great. Thank you very much. Colleagues, friends, we have run out of time. The questions are so many. I see they're still coming fast and furious on the chat, but we've run out of time. We have had a great keynote address, great panelists. You can tell we are talking about political will. We're talking about the fact that money is not the problem. It's actually systems and governance. We're talking about strengthening regulatory systems. So you talk about the AMA, and the AMA will probably be facilitated once we have the common free trade agreement properly executed. We are talking about partnerships for local manufacturing. We are talking about trust. We are talking about creating hubs across Africa in no time so that we can build back better and bounce forward, as we say. And we are talking about innovation. We are talking about capital. We are talking about all these things coming together to build a much better manufacturing and supply chain across Africa. I now really want to thank you for being so patient with us, for sending your remarks, your questions. As your moderator, I want to thank the panelists and the keynote speaker, thank AHB for hosting this webinar, and now hand over back to the Africa Health Business team. Over to you, Patricia, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, sorry, thank you very much, Dr. Gitahi. It's Liz. I've introduced myself before. We would like to give thanks and gratitude to our event partners who have made it possible for us to have this webinar today. I'm very happy we're actually stopping and finishing in due time. So thank you very much, panelists and everyone. So let's talk about the next webinar series that we're going to have, which is going to be on the 31st of July. That will be on Friday, same time. Please, we would recommend you register by visiting our website. The webinar will be in regards to testing, tracking, and treating. And we're very excited to also have the panelists who have spoken today to also join us in next week's webinar. So we have one of our partners who's having a webinar. It's going to start 7 p.m. Kenyan time. This is MedScheme in partnership with Afrocentric Group, and they're discussing the road to a COVID-19 vaccine for all. So my colleague would also type in the
link to this particular webinar. If you're free and you have time, please join us. Now we'll proceed directly to Africa Health Business video for our guests. Thank you, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. For the previous webinar reports, please visit our website. We'll share the link in a few. Thank you.